Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Lawcast. This week, we're taking a trip back in time to December 2006 for one of the worst pay-per-views in WWE history. It's ECW December to Dismember 2006. Cewsh, what do you remember about this one?
I remember everything about this one. I was a gigantic fan of WWE ECW. I was completely enthralled by it when it first started, when it was like the most incredible, like, what the hell, they're actually going to bring back ECW? Are you serious? And they're going to put CM Punk on there, and everything in the whole world is right and great, and angels are singing. Like, it was beautiful. And then this happened, and it got less beautiful.
Yeah, so we covered One Night Stand 2006 in a show a few months ago, and I think we agreed that was a tremendous pay-per-view and just an absolutely perfect way to launch this new show.
Absolutely.
Couldn't have gone any better, and it went downhill right after that. I remember the initial episodes of the ECW TV on Sci-Fi being just unwatchable garbage.
They were unwatchable garbage, and I'm saying that as somebody who was and remains a gigantic fan of this particular product. Like, my enthusiasm for it was such that I could be like, yeah, Sandman cane that zombie. Cool.
That was one of the highlights in my view.
Yeah, it was a lot of out of shape guys. The problem is that they had called up most of these guys up to do One Night Stand. And it was just like, all right, one night only, we can wrestle. But they weren't in shape. They didn't get enough notice to be on the road all the time and to be doing actual TV shows. And like, and it wound up only being like the three guys who could actually still go were the only ones you could put on.
Yeah, I remember the first ECW on Sci-Fi. The main event was this battle royal where the winner just a match you can't imagine being on WWE TV. Like, we talk about matches being bad, matches being terrible. There's a certain level of quality that just comes with being in WWE. If you're on WWE TV, you know what you're doing. You're in the top 10% of wrestlers everywhere. This was guys are totally out of shape, totally blowing up, botching everything. You got, Anderson and Big Guido and guys who just have no business being on a national TV promotion in 2006 out there.
And it's funny because very soon after that, they just start whittling down the ECW originals. So
very quickly.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the original idea was to have all of these originals and then bring the new guys in later, or if it was always the intention to do it this way. But very quickly, like, your Big Guidos, your CW Andersons, your Danny Dorings, they're out the fucking door. And we kind of boil it down to like 7 to 10 ECW originals who can actually get the job done.
Yeah, and really, most of those guys had good runs. Like, we talked about how great Sabu was here. Balls Mahoney showed up surprisingly in shape and really got over.
Yeah, let's take a second to talk about Balls Mahoney, who was never like a really huge star in ECW, but he was always around. He got a real run in WWE, not just with WWE ECW, but like Vince genuinely liked him.
Yeah,
the fans loved him.
Deserved to. He got over. I mean, he got over. He was in better shape. He was having good matches. He had, more charismatic than he had been. Had the fun storyline with Kelly and Mike Knox. A kind of shocking success story. And then Sandman was in the best shape of his career. There was rumors he was going to get a big push, and then he just kind of got fired, and I don't remember what the reason was.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what that was about, but it was kind of heartwarming to see some of these guys actually get their due for actually putting in the work and trying. Like, Sandman, like, it's amazing to think that Sandman was a part of like major storylines or was in the ring on Raw for like major stuff. It's just always funny to me that like the last image that I have burned in my mind of the Sandman is him in the ring for the Who's Your Daddy segment. Or like the Who's Your Son segment with Vince McMahon, where it turned out to be Hornswoggle.
Yes, and he was like one of the last two guys in the ring because he
forgot his cue.
Yeah, you just have somebody ringside desperately yelling at him to get out of the ring.
So like literally it's down to Triple H and the Sandman. And I just remember vividly thinking, oh dear God, please let it be the Sandman.
Okay, I think we already proposed this, but how great would it have been if Sandman had actually been his son and he'd like cleaned up and started wearing suits and like trying to be a gentleman?
It's not like they ever really said the Sandman's name on television. It could have been like the Sandman, Hack McMahon.
Exactly.
Oh, that would have been so genius.
So there were just a lot. Well, there were many issues with this. Doing it after they've taped SmackDown was a big problem. It was the same setup as 205 Live, where they would do SmackDown and then take 15 or 20 minutes, change the ring canvas, change everything, and then do it in front of this burned out crowd, half of which has left because SmackDown's over. The atmosphere wasn't great. One thing I do think was a positive was I liked the production of the show. They shot it from different camera angles. They turned the lights all the way down on the ring during the matches. They used that entrance that was off to the side, so it was just a really small curtain. I do think they did a good job making this feel different from Raw or SmackDown.
Absolutely, which is fun because they never really do that. Like every show now looks like it's interchangeable, like it's just lights that you put up on the set. But Raw and SmackDown and 205 Live and everything, like it's the same. Even like NXT to a lesser extent is basically the same production. But yeah, this definitely felt different. It was a really cool extension of what they did on the One Night Stands.
And it's also worth pointing out the ratings were pretty great for Sci-Fi. The first episode did a 2.79, and it continued to be in the twos for this whole year. It was originally a limited run. I think they originally signed for 13 episodes, but after 2 or 3 episodes, Sci-Fi was like, nope, let's make this permanent. This is drawing way better than anything else on our channel.
As far as Sci-Fi is concerned, I wouldn't be surprised if they were like, even to this day, they'd be like, yeah, we'd still carry it. Absolutely.
ECW, I mean, before, had you even heard of this channel before ECW? How many people got exposed to Sci-Fi by ECW? SmackDown ended up on this channel eventually.
Yeah. Now, in fairness, like I was a giant Sci-Fi fan because I'm a huge nerd. And in the 90s, they would just play like Stargate on repeat. Like I love that shit, but that's just me. And that's not most people's experience.
Yeah, so Vengeance was the first pay-per-view after One Night Stand. It had 2 ECW matches. Rob Van Dam successfully defended the WWE Championship against Edge, and John Cena defeated Sabu in a lumberjack match that I think we both agree is kind of a hidden gem.
Oh, absolutely. You've got to see that match. Like, John Cena and Sabu managed to have a great match, and it's like, I don't even know how. Like, even after seeing it multiple times, I don't know how the hell it worked. But that brings us, like, that's the peak. Like, the moment where Rob Van Dam has the ECW and the WWE title, and he's literally the top guy in the company, and he has his own brand based around him, and it's exciting and everything. This is the peak. From here, you can absolutely see a future where, like, Rob Van Dam feuds with CM Punk and makes him a star, and like, oh my God, this is such a huge fucking deal. And it immediately goes awry.
If only Van Dam and Sabu had not smoked weed in the car.
It's one of the great what ifs in wrestling history. It really is.
They put the world title on you and you can't wait to get to the hotel to smoke. Seriously?
And then like Sabu gets busted having like, what was it like?
It was a pipe with crack residue, I think.
Oh my God. Like, it's just one of those things where it's like, everybody knows that Rob Van Dam smokes weed, but when he gets caught and it becomes a national news story because he's the WWE champion, like, that kills careers.
This was basically the first big test to the drug policy, as I remember.
Yes.
And so they had to prove they were serious about it. And the really silly thing is, they were popped in Ohio. Marijuana is decriminalized in Ohio. So this is like a small fine and a traffic infraction. It's not a big deal, but they still, they have to suspend him. They have to take the belts off of him. So he abruptly drops the WWE title on, like, I think it was Raw on the 4th of July that year. Normally a show where nothing would happen. Instead, we get a world title change. And then on ECW the next night, Heyman screws him in a match against Big Show. And we end up with kind of the building block of this ECW brand ended up being the Big Show as ECW champion, taking on all comers.
And now that seems like it would be completely ridiculously bad. I mean, the Big Show's obviously not an ECW guy by any stretch of the imagination. I'm sure Paul would have loved to have had the Big Show in ECW back in the day, but he's obviously not someone you associate with that. So, like, right off the bat, they have to go away from ECW originals, and now it's on like a WWE guy. And a lot of people took a big hearty dump on it right off the bat. I mean, it must be said, like, people were not into the Big Show as champion to start with. And then he had that match with was the match with Batista first, where like literally they turned their backs on the ring and chanted "Change the channel."
That certainly happened. I don't remember if the match with Flair had already happened by that point, but those are the two most memorable. Is the amazing hardcore match against Ric Flair, which is another one that you gotta go see if you've never seen it, because it's Ric Flair with barbed wire, bleeding everywhere, taking thumbtack bumps, just crazy stuff. And then the moment to me that it became clear this brand was going to fail was when they I think SmackDown must have been in Europe at this point because they weren't touring with SmackDown. So for the special occasion, they did a show at the Hammerstein Ballroom, came back to where they had done One Night Stand, and the main event they booked was Batista against the Big Show.
Yeah.
Just either trying to fail or just not at all understanding the audience that was going to show up to this show.
I genuinely think that they were like, oh, hey, well, Big Show's an ECW guy now, so we'll have him go up against a WWE guy. But it just looked like an episode of SmackDown. Like, you can't... Like, it pushes it way too far. If it had been like Rob Van Dam versus Batista, people probably would have gotten up for it. But in this case, like, they turned on it in a way that is still legendary to this day. Like, it is one of the most negative crowd reactions I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, today we're a lot more accustomed to this sort of thing. But even if this happened now, it would be pretty shocking to see the crowd turn on something that hard.
The front row turns around and turns away from the ring so they don't have to watch.
Change the channel, these guys suck, just everything you can imagine.
Now, with that said, the Big Show does wind up getting kind of super over, and this may be the best run of his career.
Yeah, certainly the best in WWE. I think I'll always have a soft spot for the Giant in WCW and think that was probably the best he was ever used, but this is the best he ever was in WWE right here.
Absolutely. Like, he's taking on all comers. He's an actual monster. It must be said, like, we were talking before the show started about this, but he invents this move, which is like a Cobra clutch, and then he backbreakers them, and then he just chucks them halfway across the ring. And it's like the best Giant finisher I've ever seen in my entire life. And he just invents it out of nothing, and he never uses it again after this.
Nope. There's no longer the Extreme Giant after this.
That sucks. But Big Show during this era ruled. Like, he was really good.
So we haven't talked about Kurt Angle yet because he's basically not around at all after One Night Stand. He has a groin injury and then his painkiller addiction gets out of control, and they end up firing him when he refuses to go to rehab. And kind of the word that was circulating at this point is they were afraid he was going to die.
Yeah. And I mean, it's scary.
Not something they were taking lightly a year after Eddie Guerrero.
Yeah. I remember vividly, like, all the reports coming out that, like, Vince is trying to save Kurt's life and Kurt won't listen. And, like, Kurt shows up in TNA, like, the next month. Like, he's not taking it seriously.
Weeks later.
Yeah.
It's, yeah. Sort of forgotten in retrospect just how irresponsible it was of TNA to bring him in at that point.
Yes, absolutely. But
enabling a sick man.
But that's another what if is Kurt Angle. Like, what if they have Kurt Angle, somebody who ECW fans will accept, who's a genuine main eventer? Like, that changes things too. Like, there's just such a talent drain. They really did try. I mean, they give them Van Dam, they give them Big Show, they give them Angle. Those are three legitimate main eventers at a time where they didn't have a ton of stars. And then it's just a shame that
snake bitten.
By the end, it's just Big Show.
Yeah. So for months and months, this December ECW pay-per-view has been lingering on the calendar, and I kept waiting for the announcement that they had canceled it. I was just like, there's no way they're actually going to try to do an ECW pay-per-view. It will be insane. Nobody's going to buy this. But I don't know, they'd already reserved the pay-per-view time, or they were too stubborn and they decided to go ahead with it.
I can't really blame them. Obviously, the pay-per-view schedule is something that they set up basically the year before. So, like, the pay-per-view company's already expecting this pay-per-view, but there's already like 3 other pay-per-views during the month of December in WWE at this point. Like, it's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, they ran 3 pay-per-views in roughly 6 weeks. They had Survivor Series at the end of November. They had this the first week of December, and then they had Armageddon 2 weeks after this. Do you remember what the main event of that Armageddon was?
No, what is it?
John Cena and Batista against Booker T and Finlay, with no gimmicks, no titles on the line, no stipulations.
Wow, that is very weird.
Yeah, I don't know who bought that show.
Me.
But more people than bought this.
Yeah. Now, full disclosure, cards on the table. Let me just say this right now. I bought December to Dismember and watched it live. There's only 90,000 of us who can honestly say this.
An exclusive club.
But I am one of them. I was up for this goddamn show. And as we watched it, I just kept asking myself over and over, why?
Were you in it for Bobby Lashley at this point? Was that already going on? At
this point, I am not Bobby Lashley fan number 1. Though, okay, let's get into the Bobby Lashley thing for just a second. And I'm sorry for
this is what the people came for.
Yeah, I'm sorry for this deviation. But here's the deal about Bobby Lashley. If you look at him, this is a guy with a build that the gods put together.
Oh my God.
You know what I mean? Like, he looks like a star the second that you see him. He debuts in the company.
Brock Lesnar.
Unfortunately, he's got such a great physique that they debut him probably 2 years before he's actually ready.
Yeah, the story is they brought him to TV just to like meet him and talk to him, and Vince saw him and was like, "God damn, get him on TV."
And literally, like, a month later, he's in a feud with Simon Dean about who can eat the most cheeseburgers or some shit. Like, it was ridiculous.
Fit Finlay, though, worked miracles with him. That feud, just Lashley has no business being on national TV, and Finlay just grinds good matches out of him.
And this is where I first took notice of Bobby Lashley, because it was an obvious carry job by Fit Finlay during the course of that feud, and also by William Regal and Booker T, as Lashley kind of got into the feud with the whole Booker's Court thing. But there was something there. Like a physical chemistry that he didn't necessarily have in promos and stuff like that. But when he got in the ring and he actually wrestled and he did like aggressive stuff, it worked. Not for everybody. Crowds didn't necessarily get behind him, but I just saw something there. And then when he comes to ECW, like at this point, I'm just kind of like, yeah, I like that Lashley guy. He's pretty cool, but he's not like my favorite wrestler in the entire world. At this point, CM Punk is my favorite wrestler in the entire world. And Bobby Lashley can go fuck himself if he thinks he's going to take CM Punk's spot. And then that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, so I'll say Bobby Lashley has all the potential in the world, and any wrestling promoter would have pushed this guy.
Oh,
now,
questionably.
Most of them would have let him actually get some seasoning before just throwing him to the wolves the way they did. He maybe should have been debuting in WWE around this point, whereas he had been up on the main roster for a year already. Probably more like after WrestleMania this year would have been a good time to debut, and instead at that WrestleMania, he was in... It didn't go on last, but it was the real main event of the show and one of the biggest drawing matches in wrestling history with the McMahon-Trump hair match.
That is a very weird trivia thing that we'll all try to remember years and years from now. Like, who did Umaga wrestle in the hair versus hair match? Like, Bobby Lashley, I guess?
Yeah,
that's part one of the diatribe.
Who is 6'3", 6'4", 280 pounds of solid muscle, amateur wrestling background, military background, a lot of appealing things here. I think the first issue is no promo skills at all.
None.
Can't let him talk. As soon as that voice comes out of that body, everybody just laughs.
He literally does not learn how to cut a promo until like 4 years into his TNA run. So let's be very clear. Bobby Lashley can't cut a fucking promo. The argument for ages and ages was give him a manager, for God's sake. Why won't they give him a manager? I kind of get why they didn't. It's almost like they were trying to create an amalgamation of Brock Lesnar and Goldberg. And that's kind of what they wanted him to be. Like, they wanted him to have the physical presence and charisma of Goldberg and also not cut promos. Like, Goldberg didn't have to cut promos. He just came out and beat people's asses.
Yeah,
but
and if they had just given him a Goldberg push where he was undefeated for months. I mean, he was undefeated, but they didn't do. I guess Goldberg is the only guy they've ever done the like counting the matches thing with, which is crazy to me that they've never gone back to that.
Right.
Because that's what got Gold. I mean, Goldberg's intensity got him over, but really the winning streak and the he's 96-0 or whatever is really what got him going.
And it's funny because all through Lashley's run to this point, they keep beating him. Like, Finlay beat him a bunch. Booker beat him like 20 times. He beat him for the King of the Ring. They don't protect Lashley like you think they would protect someone like this. And then they bump him to ECW, which I guess they saw as like a vehicle to push him. But at the time, it was just like, man, this guy's getting buried. Bumped to the C show, I guess.
Yeah, but I see the logic of it because you can make it his show and you can have him dominate without having to have him wrestle John Cena or Batista. And you can save those matches for down the line when they can be special.
Right. And we
it's
will
like
eventually
they have to force discipline on themselves because they had none of it.
This is Bobby Lashley diatribe number 1. Okay. The second one will come when we eventually do like another one further down the track. Once he's evolved into a different kind of performer, that's when I become Bobby Lashley defender and fan number 1 in the entire world forever. That's not the guy that's right here. And so I don't want to get ahead of ourselves and talk about all that stuff in the future, but just know that like it was obvious. Like, while it seems easy now to say that, like, why would you push Lashley? Why would you make him the ECW champion? It doesn't make any sense. I get what Vince saw. Like, this guy looks like money.
And for somebody who's only been wrestling a few years, he was good in the ring. I mean, it's basically Roman Reigns in a lot of ways, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, yeah, I mean, it's another in a series of, like, guys Vince McMahon fell in love with and pushed too fast. And pushed too fast and just couldn't figure out how to push right. Roman Reigns, John Cena, Diesel, all kind of tried to force them to be a certain kind of cookie cutter baby face that they couldn't be.
Right. And but the other thing is, all of those guys eventually found their way and became great. And it just takes patience, man. It takes time.
Yeah, but Vince McMahon is not patient.
No.
So going into the show, they'd announced 2 matches.
That may be a record.
One of which
I never heard of that.
One of which had no ECW wrestlers in it. That was the Hardys against Eminem. But thank God they put that on this show because, oh boy, this undercard. And then the other matches, the main event, the Extreme Elimination match, which is Big Show, Van Dam, CM Punk, Sabu, Test, and Lashley. On the one hand, I see why they decided to do the Elimination Chamber here because the show just needed something to sell it, and the Chamber was still a new enough gimmick that it could do that. But on the other hand, putting your top 6 guys in one match when you have so little depth is really putting a strain on the rest of the card.
Absolutely. Like, you got to, like, the build for this show, and they start building it in October, is building towards Rob Van Dam versus The Big Show. It's hard for me to say that should not have been the main event of this show, because that also frees up all this other talent to do all this other stuff. And maybe this show becomes suddenly like, hey, this is a pretty cool ass show, actually. But on the other hand, without the Elimination Chamber, does anybody actually pay to watch it? Because
no, I think without the Chamber, this does 70,000. It wouldn't shock me if 20,000. They sold 20,000 people on this to see the Elimination Chamber.
Yeah, on paper, it's cool to be like, hey, why don't instead we do CM Punk versus Hardcore Holly and Test versus Bobby Lashley? That would be a better development thing. Who the fuck's paying to see either one of those matches? Nobody.
Yeah. The one thing I had sort of thought about was they could have done the qualifying matches for the Chamber on the show, and then the guys have to work twice, which is a lot to ask guys to do a full match on the undercard, and then an elimination Chamber match in the main event. But then you can have stuff like, Punk versus Matt Striker and Van Dam against Hardcore Holly, and you have a respectable undercard and then a big main event.
And it's kind of a cool idea because then Big Show, who's this huge, intimidating presence, is fresh, and all these other guys got to try to beat him. Like that's a cool idea. I like that idea a lot. Though it's also weird too. Like another thing going against the show is Sabu gets bounced from the match the day of,
and from the promotion. I think this is it for him, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Like, I don't know if he actually had an injury. That's how they explained it, or if they just got rid of him. But Hardcore Holly just gets slotted in.
I think he showed up to the show fucked up.
Oh. And so, yeah, they just put Hardcore Holly in the match apropos of nothing.
Yeah. Fans were not a big fan of that, if you can believe that.
He had lost 3 different qualifying matches to get in.
What do you think of just not announcing the undercard? Apparently that was Heyman's idea, with the explanation that was kind of how they would do it with the old ECW pay-per-views, is they would only promote the top couple matches, and then the other matches would just be bonus matches, not announced in advance. Is it better to just leave mystery than to announce matches no one wants to see?
I kind of am fine with it. Like, it's one of those things where, like, it's like back in the day where you just look at a wrestling poster and it would only have like the 2 biggest matches on it, and then you just come to the show to see those. It's one of those things. I don't ever really remember the announced matches ahead of pay-per-views being that big of a deal. Like, I always remember being like, all right, we know what the main event is. We know what these 2 matches are. And I kind of assume, since these 2 guys are feuding, that they might fight. But like, they didn't always announce full pay-per-view cards before the show.
No, it was pretty common, at least certainly in the 90s, to have unannounced matches. Even
right.
The WWF was always a little more kind of with it and would promote everything in advance, but they'd even in the Attitude Era be like, oh, and we're going to have this match too, because turns out we have some extra time to fill on this show.
Now, this is obviously that taken to an extreme, but when you look at the card that they're actually... There you go. Like, there's nothing on here that I would promote, except for those 2 matches.
No, I think promoting these matches might have actually made the buy rate worse.
The fun thing about the Hardy Boys versus Eminem match is it basically, the way that match works is it's an open challenge that the Hardy Boys put out. Like, hey, we want to wrestle on this show. Open challenge to anybody in the whole world. And Eminem weren't really a tag team at the time because Joey Mercury, did we determine if he was hurt or suspended or... I'm not super sure why he was out, but it was just Nitro by himself at the time.
Yeah, I think he either had an injury or he may have been having substance problems, which would be a recurring problem throughout his career.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so he hadn't been wrestling. Jeff and Nitro had been feuding over the Intercontinental title, I think.
Right, and then the Hardy Boys had just reunited, and so Nitro and Mercury surprisingly reunite and accept the challenge. But the funnest part the funnest part about that to me is that somebody else accepted the Hardy Boys Open Challenge. Do you know who it was?
Nope.
The Voodoo Kin Mafia. BG James and James.
Oh, man. Oh, that was the most try-hard thing ever.
Yeah. They literally went on TNA television, accepted the open challenge, and then didn't show up to the pay-per-view. If they had showed up in the front row, I would have laughed my ass off.
They didn't even redo the DX invasion here.
They should have. They should have shown up. I bet you Paul would have done something with it.
At some point, I'm going to rant on the DX invasion because I just think that's the most overrated moment in wrestling history.
Yeah. But I'll always wonder, like, if they show up, do you think Paul does something with them? Because that seems very Paul.
He wasn't really running things at this point. I mean, at this point, he's a week away from getting... the writing's been on the wall for a while, but he's a week away from being out of there.
Yep.
So maybe he would have in that case.
It's a fair point. I just love the idea of him being like, oh, Vince thinks he owns me, huh? Well, the Voodoo Kin Mafia are the new tag team champions. Fuck you.
Okay, so getting into the show. It's Sunday, December 3rd, 2006. We're at the James Brown Arena in Augusta, Georgia, that noted ECW hotbed. I think this was just like a SmackDown house show that was going to be here on this day, and they put it on the schedule as the pay-per-view. This is like a 5,000 seat building.
It makes me so confused that they run Georgia and Tennessee and Florida and Alabama and all these places so many times. It took them until 2017 to run a WCW like themed show.
Yeah, this is the kind of town they didn't even do WCW pay-per-views in. And here we have a WWE pay-per-view being run in it. This is the kind of show that, yeah, like Ole Anderson would have booked a Georgia spot show in like 1984.
Right.
The announced attendance is about 4,800. I don't know, eyeballing it, that seemed about right, unless maybe it turned out there were only people on the hard camera side, but it looked mostly full. It's a tiny building.
Yeah, the legend about this show is that they only had like 2,000 people in attendance. Looking at it,
maybe 2,000 paid. I don't know. Maybe they papered it heavily.
Maybe it doesn't look that bad, honestly. It just looks like a 3/4 full Raw arena. You know, it's not like a big deal.
I kind of like a smaller, intimate venue. I think they should run some smaller buildings for TV now because they're not drawing very well. I'd like to see some different looking buildings instead of the same kind of basketball arena every single week.
Yeah, and it gives you kind of a cool, different vibe. It's like the difference between an arena show and a club show. Like it was always cool when they would go and they would run in like Chicago at like the Rosemont, and like it was like this tiny little shit box, but like people were like stacked up 3 like layers deep on every side. It's just different arenas are cool like that.
This show drew 90,000 buys, the worst drawing WWE pay-per-view in history.
I would personally like to hear from any of you who also contributed to the buys, because I think we should create a club, honestly.
It's insane. $40 for this garbage.
Yep. Let the record show, I also spent $40 on Survivor Series and Armageddon.
Man.
$120 in 3 weeks, ladies and gentlemen.
So that kind of thing makes it crazy to me that they created WWE Network, because people were still buying their pay-per-views, not always in huge numbers, but they were still getting at least 120,000 buys for $60 a pop.
Yeah, you don't know what a relief it was to me when literally I was spending like
$700, $800 a year.
Yeah, I was spending like upwards of $1,000 a year just on pay-per-views, including TNAs. And then all of a sudden TNA goes in the shitter and the network comes out and I'm like, hallelujah, it's down to $10.
You got a huge raise. Yeah. Joey Styles and Taz on commentary. I thought they were just fine. No real complaints there.
This is during the period, though, where Taz goes from being like, man, Taz sure is awesome on SmackDown to, Taz kind of sucks.
I think it was not having Heyman producing him.
Yeah. It was a shame because Taz on SmackDown with Michael Cole was great. This Taz, not as great.
And Joey Styles, fan of his ECW work, never seemed comfortable in WWE.
The only great thing he did in WWE is, do you remember that promo that he cut on Raw where like Lawler was bullying him and he just gets up there and cuts like the shootest promo in the history of pro wrestling, like the original pipe bomb?
Yeah, Joey Styles is a secret badass. He also knocked out JBL.
Yeah, fucking Styles, go.
In the dark match, Stevie Richards defeated Rene Dupree.
God, it's just a shame we didn't get to see it.
I know. Has there ever been a dark match you actually wanted to see?
I hope it was a literal dark match. They turned the lights off and nobody watched it.
They did. I guess they did do a DVD of dark matches. Really, like they found the awesome dark matches that exist and did a DVD release recently.
It's funny because I remember in like 2001, I went to like 5 WWE shows. Some were house shows, some were TV tapings, whatever. And every single time, a guy named Ron Waterman was in a dark match on the show, and I was like, "Who the fuck is this Ron Waterman guy? He's in every show."
Nothing ever came of that.
Nothing ever came of it.
So we're introduced, and Joey Styles says a new ECW champion will be crowned in the Elimination Chamber tonight.
Truly a Tony Schiavone-esque moment.
Yes.
Holy shit.
Yeah, Taz gives him a look when he says that.
I mean, it's not like it was a huge surprise. We all knew.
Like everybody knew Big Show. I mean, no, not everybody knew Big. If you read the dirt sheets, you knew Big Show was injured and finishing up. But yeah, people could probably have predicted he's going to lose the title here.
And this is what everything was leading to. Like, even if Van Dam wasn't going to win the title back, like maybe Lashley was, maybe Punk was, maybe Test was, like they were leading this to a title change. Like that's what this show represented.
Yeah.
So but still, you don't just fucking say it.
Is the Hardy Boys against Eminem. Styles mentions there are rumors that the Hardys are splitting up after tonight. I don't know what that is really in reference to, but they end up winning the tag belts a few months after this, and they continue to team together for a little while.
Is the next WrestleMania the one where Matt turns on him and they have a feud?
No, that doesn't happen for another. That's 25.
Oh, right. Okay, so
we're going into WrestleMania 23 here.
I think that's a whole Jeff leaves and comes back time from now.
Jeff gets his big singles run.
Got it. Okay. Then, yeah, I don't know anything about that because obviously they stay together and just start doing ladder matches with literally everyone.
Yeah. Hardys dominate early. It's a slow pace because this match has to fill a lot of time.
They get 23 minutes for a tag match. It's great.
They have you've got to, though. This is one of those shows where it's just a desperate bout. They barely fill 2 hours with this show.
Yeah. They could have given the Hardys and Eminem 45 minutes, and I don't think we could have reasonably complained about it.
No, it's a good match. Matt hits a crucifix powerbomb. Matt gets tripped up by Melina and taken out by Mercury. There's not a lot of heat on the match, which isn't surprising. They're not ECW guys, and there's no real feud here. But crowd is kind of into it, but not really.
They love Jeff. That's basically what it is.
Yeah. I don't know when we'll get to talk about John Morrison again, but it's always going to bug me that he didn't become a big... I mean, he's doing fine for himself on the indies now, but it's just strange to me that he's not... WWE didn't work out for him because just the look and the athleticism, it just seems like Vince should have eaten that up.
There was a moment when... that I think almost everyone forgets, but like when Miz had the WWE title after he had cashed in on Randy Orton, he entered into like a mini feud with Morrison. And there was like a moment where people are like, they put the belt on the wrong one because they were kind of like the Michaels Jannetty, like which one's actually going to be the success. And they have like a Falls Count Anywhere type of match on Raw.
Where he's doing all the parkour stuff.
Unfucking believable. It's a great match. And like Morrison's a star in it. And at that point, like almost everybody is just like, dude, this guy's gonna get it. Like he's a WrestleMania main eventer someday. He's a gigantic star, and it never goes anywhere. That's literally the peak of his career.
Well, I remember also around this time was when Sheamus won the King of the Ring, and they had Morrison come out and cut a promo on him, and it's literally one of the worst promos I've ever heard.
He's just not...
He was so wooden and awkward.
And here's the thing. Every time Vince sees a hot new babyface that he thinks might be something, he tries to make him be The Rock. He's just like, go out there and cut this comedy promo where you bust on him. Yeah. Ha ha ha.
I guess John Morrison looks like it. He's got the look of a heel. He's really good looking to be a babyface, but he wrestles a babyface style, so it's always been tough.
Right.
It's that Shawn Michaels paradox.
Yeah, it's just a shame because he had so much talent, and like the fans eventually really did get behind him because the parkour stuff was very cool. Like it was a cool character.
And I guess Vince didn't respect him because he let Melina bang other dudes.
Okay, let's talk about this for a second.
This is way more interesting than the show.
During this period, there's this great rumor where Melina walks into the dressing room, sees Batista, and she's like, hey, Batista, want to fuck? And Batista's like, okay. And Morrison's just also in the room. And Batista's like, really? And she's like, yeah. So Batista just fucks Melina right in front of him.
I mean,
And that rumor got around everywhere.
it's probably 10% true.
Yeah, I'm sure there's something absolutely wrong about that. I don't even really want to criticize anybody's relationship details. Like, it's none of our fucking business.
No.
But it's just one of those stories that gets around, and it made Nitro look like a loser and Batista look awesome. And it just, I just remember everybody being like, Batista's the man.
I don't know if this is what destroyed him in WWE, but I just kind of want to believe that Vince heard that and he was like, well, goddamn, can't push him as my top babyface now.
Right, exactly.
So back to this match. It's pretty good. Hot tag to Jeff. He's throwing his body around the ring. Everybody dives onto each other. Twist of fate. Jeff goes for the Swanton Bomb, but misses. Long heat segment. Hot tag to Matt. He does the second rope leg drop with the suicide taunt, which has always cracked me up.
Like, it's like the safest move in the history of the world, and he does the
thing is,
suicide
it's still not, because a leg drop is not a safe move at all.
Not for Matt to do. Yeah, because
look at Hulk Hogan try to walk and tell me that the leg drop is safe.
Look at Matt try to walk. God, he looks like he's got wooden planks in his legs.
Yeah, no, that like nobody should do a top rope leg drop. It's such a tough bump to take.
But it's just funny because it looks like the tamest move in the world. And he's always like, I'm going to kill myself.
It's like he's jumping off like a stool. 3 feet in the air. Nitro hits a super Frankensteiner on Jeff. We get stereo superplexes on the Hardys. Jeff gets in an argument with Melina. She gets drop kicked off the apron by Nitro. Eminem hit the snapshot, but Matt breaks up the pin. Double twist of fate on both Nitro and Mercury. Then the Swanton Bomb on both of them, and the Hardys win in about 23 minutes. Long match, but good. You know, they had to go long here. They were trying to fill some time.
Yeah, and I mean, it was a very good match. Eminem is one of those kind of forgotten teams, but they were very, very, very good.
I was a big fan.
Yeah, like
one of the few good tag teams in this era.
They did a great job. Melina does a great job. This is great. Like, this is everything you want from a tag match on pay-per-view. It's just so funny that it's on this pay-per-view. Like, in any other show, this would be like, hey, that was a really hot opener. And then you'd forget about it. And on this show, it's like, this is the only thing worth holding on to. This is the only thing that made our money worthwhile.
Yeah. We get a pre-taped promo from RVD. He says he's going to get hurt tonight. Might be scarred. He might have his career ended, but worth it to get the ECW title back. Then we get Matt Striker versus Balls Mahoney, and this, speaking of being scarred. Highlight of this match, the front and back of Matt Striker's tights. He has his face on the back of his tights, and it's the most heelish thing imaginable.
It's pretty great, actually, yeah. It's like right there on the crack.
Yeah. Every time you see it, you're like, wait, does he have like a hole in his pants? Oh, no, it's his face.
It's his face.
I don't hate Matt Striker. Is there something wrong with me?
No, and it's kind of funny because the backlash against Matt Striker was so intense that, like, I think it kind of overshadowed that he did a lot of good stuff. Like, not necessarily as a wrestler, because God knows, like, he didn't do a lot of good stuff.
That was not his forte.
I liked a lot of his commentary. The problem is that he was the first guy to really kind of realize where the business was going, all towards Smarks. So he tried to pander to them. And there's nothing Smarks hate more than being deliberately pandered to. And that kind of lost.
Yeah, I would ask, is there that much difference between how Morrow does commentary and how Striker did it?
Absolutely not. I hate Mauro Ranallo's commentary, honestly. I do not like it.
Ooh, hot take.
I do not like it. It's too much. Like, I can deal with that from my color guy. I hate that from my play-by-play guy. I hate random little references to obscure TV shows and bands. Like, I don't like that. I don't like it at all. That's just me, though.
I liked Stryker's promo before this match where he demands that the referees strictly enforce the rules of professional wrestling.
I wish they had done something more with the fact that it's called like Striker rules, but it involves absolutely no punching whatsoever.
Queensberry rules, yeah,
Yeah.
no use of a closed fist, no kicking with the point of the boot. Just come up with every obscure wrestling rule you can think of.
And then, of course, he's going up against Balls Mahoney, who I don't know has ever had a match under actual rules.
No.
So, like, I can see how they thought this would be an interesting match. It sucks, but I can see what they thought.
Matt Stryker with an entry into the Alex Wright Hall of Fame here.
Ooh, what's the Alex Wright Hall of Fame?
Guys with giant bulges in their tights.
Yes, he does. He's sporting quite a bit.
I'm sure it's involuntary.
I'm sure. I'm sure Balls Mahoney does not inspire that in many people.
Balls wins with a spine buster after 5 minutes. This sucked.
Yeah. See, here's the problem. Matt Stryker could talk. Matt Stryker could not work.
No, if they had actually used managers, and he did actually manage Viscera for a while as Big Daddy V, which was, I was a big fan of Big Daddy V because I love gigantic dudes, and I liked Matt Stryker managing him, but managers seemed to be the right thing for him, and commentator didn't really pan out in WWE, but he's made a living for himself elsewhere.
I'll always wish that they had more room for managers in WWE. I mean, they're kind of starting that again in NXT a little bit, and that's kind of cool to see. And so probably the next generation will have managers on everybody. But
once Triple H is in charge, everybody will have a manager.
God damn it. Once Triple H is in charge, everything will be perfect. Gummy bears will fall from the sky.
You imagine traveling back in time 10 years and telling us that?
Oh my God. I would have strung up anybody who dared say such a thing.
They cut back to Punk warming up. It's a 10-second shot, but I just like, oh, this is an athletic contest. He's preparing himself for it. That's refreshing.
And CM Punk could make something as small as warming up look so fucking cool.
Yeah.
Like, there's just an intrinsic quality he had during this period, and he lost it a lot when he got called up to the main roster. Like, the Straight Edge Society stuff was pretty good and stuff like that, but he just lost that, like, cool quality that he has during this period, where, like, every little thing he does, and, like, the crowd's up for it. Just like, ooh, who's this guy? He looks awesome. Like, let's do this.
Heyman got him, and Vince didn't. Vince just...
Yeah.
Didn't get it. The tattoos, the long hair, the piercings. That's not Vince McMahon's kind of guy.
It's funny to think what like a motivated Paul Heyman could have done with CM Punk. Like CM Punk was supposed to be Paul Heyman's like last great project. And if he had actually got to go with it, it's incredible to think what might have been. Because we could be talking about like top guy CM Punk when he's young, not like 10 years later,
Yeah. They show Sabu knocked out backstage. He's pulled from the show and never wrestles for WWE again. Loud bullshit chants from the crowd.
I honestly think it would have been better just not to do this. Just to like show it on a graphic and just be like, sorry, he's hurt.
Yeah.
Because this feels like bullshit. Like that's how I would have felt too. Like, really you're booking this shit?
Speaking of bullshit, look what we've got next. It's Elijah Burke and Sylvester Turkeye against the full-blooded Italians. I was so intrigued by Sylvester Turkeye, and then it turned out he didn't know how to wrestle.
Yeah, it's just one of the... So many people were intrigued by Sylvester Turkeye, and he kind of came out of the same like UPW factory that like John Cena and Samoa Joe and a bunch of other guys came out of. Except like they learned how to work and he did.
Yeah.
So like he got a shot all over the world.
He's badass. He's 6'6", 280. He lost the NCAA Heavyweight Wrestling Championship to Kurt Angle his senior year. He was a 3-time All-American at NC State. Martial artist, kickboxer. Looks awesome. Like got a Bruiser Brody thing going on, but just doesn't not ready for prime time. As soon as he tags in, you can see he's totally lost.
And it's one of those things where, like, maybe if Kurt's still around, they can make like a stable out of Burke and Turkai, and that could have been really cool. But like, they're not ready to go it by themselves. Though it's funny because the entire like new generation, as they wind up being, of like guys that get called up in developmental and put on ECW, Elijah Burke's the only one that kind of works, and he'll eventually be like put it together as D'Angelo De Niro in TNA. But
him, Thorne, Stryker, and
Marquise Corvon.
Yes. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is, I mean, so I feel like over the course of about a month, they went through like every iteration of Burke and Turkai. At first, it was Turkai's the wrestler, and Burke is just like his hype man. And then they were tag partners. And then after this, they stopped letting Turkai wrestle, and he was just Burke's enforcer. And then Turkai just disappeared.
I don't think they ever really knew what they had in Burke. Like, I'm not sure that, I mean, he was green as grass too. So I'm not sure that there really was a ton there at this point. But there was a moment when he was in TNA where I thought that he was going to be the guy in TNA for a long time.
It's got a ton
and then they fucked it up because they're TNA.
I'm surprised they didn't see more in him because they really never do anything with him.
Yeah, I mean, at some point I'll make you watch a specific TNA show that we'll talk about later. But and I think that you'll see what I saw. Like it's something really special was there, and you can kind of see that charisma here. But man, he can't wrestle.
No, Burke gets the pin with a stroke, and then Turkai hits a muscle buster, and the crowd chants TNA. I really wanted Samoa Joe to come to ECW. I remember fantasy booking that in my head.
Man. Did you ever hear, like, they only really brought it up on their shoot interview that they did, CM Punk and Samoa Joe. Did you ever hear that, like, sometime around 2003, Mick Foley seriously pitched Vince McMahon on the idea of bringing in CM Punk and Samoa Joe as his stable? As his, like, heel stable?
No, that sounds insane.
Yeah, he was dead serious. He was just like, there's all these people, and they all look the same, but I wasn't the same when I was coming up, and neither are these two, but they'll work circles around everybody else. Like, literally, he wanted to insert CM Punk and Samoa Joe into main event storylines in 2003. And, like, he was seriously pitching Vince. Like, I'll quit if you don't do this.
God. Oh, man. I need to read all of Foley's books and just, like, make a list of all the insane storylines he came up with.
And, like, it's just so funny, the ones that Vince was just like, yeah, sure, let's do that. And then this one, he was just like, who? Fuck that.
He's so fat, and he's so skinny.
And, like, they weren't ready. I mean, CM Punk during that era was still wearing the gym shorts. Like, that's it horrible.
I love how I keep getting to do this. Speaking of horrible, it's Daivari against Tommy Dreamer.
This is a special kind of horrible. This is like Tommy Dreamer almost dies for this show. This show. Oh my God.
Yeah, he lets Khali hit him with Khali's tree slam on the ramp, and it looks really bad.
But it's important to remember, this is not a Great Khali match. It's a match between Tommy Dreamer and Khali's interpreter, manager, whatever.
Yeah, so Khali, a couple months before this, was feuding with The Undertaker. And a couple months after this, he's feuding with John Cena for the world title. But in between here, he's just an enforcer because I think they wanted him to watch Daivari wrestle and try to learn from him.
You would have to say that it kind of worked. Like, Khali gets better despite his reputation.
Better. He wasn't that bad. When he was against Cena, he was okay. And that was kind of the first time everybody had to acknowledge, yeah, Cena actually did a good job when he had that good match with Khali.
Yeah. I mean, Cena just also had a special way of carrying people who suck. Like, he couldn't have a great match against other great people, but he could have a great match against the shittiest people on the roster. Like, that's John Cena from this era.
Nice pop for Dreamer. Khali quickly gets ejected, and he doesn't emote at all about it. Like, they show him, and he just has no expression, and then he turns and walks away.
It's like he does not understand what has taken place.
Did he speak English?
Yeah, by this point he did.
Dreamer makes a comeback. He goes for the DDT. Device slips out, rolls Dreamer up, grabs his pants for the win.
Please note that this is an ECW pay-per-view where the only conceivable draw is for hardcore ECW people to honor ECW. And Daivari beats Tommy Dreamer
with a shitty roll up.
It's like, come on.
This is the funeral for the old ECW.
It is.
And as we mentioned, Dreamer takes Kali's finisher on the stage, and boy, was that not necessary.
Like, the Great Khali is like almost 7.5 feet tall. Like, he's a big dude, right? Like, he's a big fucking dude. And so his finisher is he chokes you, lifts you up over his head, and then just drops your ass.
And Dreamer takes this on a metal ramp.
On a metal, it was a meat, like a slab of meat hitting the grill kind of thud.
Yeah.
And it's painful to watch. And I had to watch it so many times when I did the review on the blog for this, because I had to GIF it just right. So I watched this happen like 100 times, and by the end, I wanted to send an apology letter to Tommy Dreamer.
Backstage, Heyman tells Hardcore Holly he can have Sabu's spot in the Elimination Chamber.
Just to reiterate, Hardcore Holly had lost 3 qualifying matches to get into this match. They might as well have given it to Kelly, honestly.
Do you remember when they had Hardcore Holly beat CM Punk and the internet had a literal meltdown?
I do.
It was ruined forever.
It's so funny because Hardcore Holly, it was such like a weird time for him because that happened and the internet took a shit on Hardcore Holly. But then he had that match with Rob Van Dam where he cut his back open from like top to bottom. And then like the internet loved Hardcore Holly. He was like the best dude on the roster.
Well, based on Hardcore Holly's reputation and CM Punk's performance in UFC, I think we would know who would win a real fight between them.
The hardest hard man in hard.
Yeah, I got an idea for ECW. Give Holly the belt.
And then what? Beat everybody.
Would have been better than this shit.
That's amazing.
Next match. Kevin Thorne and Ariel versus Mike Knox and Kelly Kelly. And
I mean,
I love that we've now called both of Mordecai's pay-per-view matches.
Yes.
We've covered the entire run of Mordecai.
I mean, okay, look. Of all of the attempts to like fuse sci-fi with ECW, I think Kevin Thorne and Ariel were the most successful, right?
Yeah. I mean, Ariel was more over than he was because he sucked, but I thought he had a cool look.
Yeah, like she looked great. People loved her.
Yeah. The only thing they care about here is when she and Kelly Kelly get in there, like the crowd is into that. Like we've got like the tough looking goth girl against the really cute blonde girl, and shit's gonna get real.
And I just love Kelly Kelly's backstory during this whole period is that she's dating Mike Knox, but she badly wants to fuck CM Punk. Badly.
Fiction becomes reality.
There it is.
And Vince McMahon taught her to dance.
That is... If you never listen to Something to Wrestle With, which I find incredibly hard to believe because...
If you're listening to this garbage.
Yeah, say, why would you be listening to us when you could be listening to them? But if you haven't heard the story of Vince McMahon teaching Kelly Kelly to dance, God damn it, you should.
What happens here? Knox refuses to tag in to help Kelly, and he walks out. The crowd chants for CM Punk, but he doesn't show up because he's a dick.
Literally, at no point during any of this does Punk show up to help Kelly Kelly. He does not care. It's the same as like the AJ Lee feud later,
yes.
Where AJ Lee's just like, "I love you," and he's just like, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. Well, pretty much true to his character. He just kind of bangs him and then rolls out.
Bangs him and rolls out.
Ariel sits on Kelly Kelly's face to pin her.
High five.
After the match, Sandman shows up and he canes the shit out of Kevin Thorne. This is one of my favorite parts of the show. I loved Sandman's gimmick where he would just show up and hit people with his cane and leave.
It protected him super well. Yeah, it's like if we put him in matches, it'll expose him. So why don't we just have him cane the shit out of people? That's what people want to see. And like
exactly.
I know people really were pissed that he didn't have his Enter Sandman theme. I liked the theme that they gave him too.
Oh, I think it's a good theme. I mean, it's no Enter Sandman, but they weren't going to pay Metallica $10 million or whatever they wanted for that.
Right. It was like, dun, 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 dun. I like that. It was cool.
Yeah. I think it's a good piece of kind of generic music.
And it's so funny because this is one of those gimmicks where like Sandman could still be doing this to this day. Like there's nothing stopping. Like literally your whole gimmick is just, it's about time for Sandman to come in and cane you in the face. The end.
Lashley promo.
No.
I love it. They go back to interview him, and like before he can say anything, they cut to a video package. And I'm like, oh, good. They're not going to let him talk. But then they come back, and he has to talk, and it's not good.
Of all the people that they've shown on TV, like on the video to this point, he's the one that they let talk. Just let that sink in. They know better.
Yeah.
And they still let him talk.
They're building this thing around him, even though he can't open his mouth without exposing himself.
It's horrible.
Hard hitting, soft spoken.
They literally try to make it a selling point for him that he's got a really weird, effeminate voice.
Is there a hard hitting, soft spoken shirt?
I own one, so yes.
Once again, you and maybe 90,000 other people.
Bad to say, it's
can't be very many.
It's not very many.
Heyman comes out for a promo and says a bunch of stuff. Again, they're just filling time here. Like they barely got over 2 hours with this thing, and that was with a lot of filler in there.
I wonder if it would have been better if for the Elimination Chamber they just like, it's 10 minutes between each pod opening.
Oh boy! I mean, that's the thing is, it's actually not that long a match. It's a little over 20 minutes, so they could have easily stretched out. I think the first Elimination Chamber match was closer to 40.
Right.
Now, this is another one where they could have let Van Dam and Punk go at it for 15 minutes at the beginning of this thing.
Absolutely.
So I guess we've sort of already talked about it, but I think it's sort of gone down in legend that Heyman's proposal for this match was Big Show and Punk will start, and Punk will choke out Big Show in about 2 minutes. Just get him with a triangle choke or something and put him to sleep.
I want you guys
insane.
I want you guys to picture this for a second. The Big Show, who is the dominant champion, who's been a dominant champion here for about 6 months, and as you're well aware, is the Big Show, and CM Punk. And like CM Punk just walks over, puts him in the vice, beats him, and then just sits in the middle of the ring for 3 minutes until the next chamber opens.
Yeah. And then he doesn't win the match. Lashley still wins the match.
If
it's muddled.
Let's say that Heyman stays in charge of the show, which is not going to happen at this point, but let's just say that he does. There's money in a CM Punk versus Bobby Lashley feud because one represents WWE, one represents kind of the ECW spirit, right? I think that that's what you would have to be leading to in order to do that, because it sets Punk up as the best challenger easily.
Lashley's got to be the heel here, though, and that's not going to fly.
Exactly. And it's just one of those things, man.
Rebuild this with Heyman managing Lashley as the heel champion. That would have been great. And then you can have Punk chase him to WrestleMania and beat him at WrestleMania.
Yeah. And that's one of the things, too, is like all the people who are any good on ECW are baby faces. So when Lashley wins the title, he's next pay-per-view match at the Royal Rumble is against Test.
Oh, let's talk about Test here, actually. What does Test look like here? Like a really big hot dog that you'd see at like 7-Eleven. sitting under the heat lamp all day.
If you tried to build the Incredible Hulk out of meat,
He is
this is
so
what it might look like.
gigantic.
And he's got like those like abs that are just like tacked on, where it's just like, man, you didn't earn those abs. There were no sit-ups involved here.
It is not at all. I mean, I hate to say it, but it is not surprising that he ended up dead a few years after this, because he was clearly going at it way too hard.
Yeah, like he's easily 3 times the size that he was before. Like,
yeah,
it's
before
crazy.
He looked good, but real. Here he looks like a cartoon.
Right. And like his work is actually pretty good. Like, it's not bad.
No, he's still athletic. I mean, when he hits the elbow drop here, it's beautiful.
And it's funny because, I mean, Test is kind of an afterthought at this point, but this is the kind of product where Test could have like revived his career. You know what I mean? Like, why not? Like, this is the kind of opportunity that, like, hey, that's pretty cool. We always thought Test could have been more, and it's not going to happen because Test is not healthy.
No, I don't really. I don't feel like he was around for very long after this, and of course he ended up dead a few years later.
Not before he goes to TNA as the Punisher.
That's right. I always, for a while, I remember when I first saw Lance Hoyt, I thought he actually was Test.
I can't blame you for that. Lance Hoyt aspired to be Test.
Didn't get there.
Yeah.
So it's an extreme elimination chamber match. So each guy has a weapon with him in the pod. Punk has a chair, Test has a crowbar, Lashley has a table, and Big Show has a baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire.
Like, are we meant to believe that they chose their weapons?
I hope so, because it reveals how dumb Bobby Lashley is.
I was about to say, he brought a fucking table. Are you serious?
Yeah.
But my favorite part is later on in the match, and I'm sorry to jump ahead, but Bobby Lashley has to break out of his chamber with his weapon.
With the table, yes.
But to say, you know what would have been helpful for that? Maybe a crowbar or a baseball bat. Nope, he's got to use a table.
Yeah, I'm surprised he didn't just kick his way through the bulletproof glass.
I had to say, that bulletproof glass, it's very thick.
Yeah. Van Dam and Holly start. Only real interesting thing here is where Van Dam does the Spider-Man deal where he catches the cage and then jumps off of it.
I'm amazed that he had the balls to do that after what happened to Triple H in the first Elimination Chamber. Like, you would have thought that would have haunted him.
He easily could have. I mean, I'm not joking. Triple H could have died there.
It came very close to Triple H actually dying. And like,
we continued to wrestle for 20 minutes after getting his throat crushed. It's insane. And then he really didn't miss any time.
Nope. Because Triple H, secret badass.
Yeah. Punk comes in. He gets the pop of the night.
It really can't be
came
overstated.
Punk.
Paul Heyman is right.
Yes.
CM Punk is the star that this audience wants.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a question. Like, they want him more than they want Van Dam. They want him more than they want anybody. Like, Punk is the guy.
Yeah, it's just Vince doesn't care about this audience. Vince doesn't want the ECW fans. He doesn't care about that.
I mean, you might ask, why did he bring back ECW then? But that, it's Vince McMahon.
You're trying to apply logic to the illogical.
Mm-hmm.
You just can't do it. Van Dam gets busted open, probably hard way. I didn't really catch how this happened.
Yeah, I think it was hard way. I think he just hit some chains.
Like, it was that cut. Yeah, it was one of those cuts over the eye where you would not blade yourself there in the eyebrow. Not a ton happening. Test comes in. Punk is the first guy eliminated after the frog splash. That feels like a fuck you to Heyman.
The
They didn't
fans,
have Test beat him. Yeah, all the air comes out of the arena as soon as that happens.
yeah, the fans are like, it becomes obvious at that point. Literally obvious. It was obvious to me. Lashley's winning. Period. Like, that's just what it is.
But I think the fans were still holding out hope that maybe they'll go with Punk. But instead, he's the first guy out of the match.
Exactly. So, like, as soon as he's gone, it's just like, well, Hardcore Holly's not going to win.
Test hits Holly with the big boot and pins him. Van Dam goes up on Big Show's pod. Big Show grabs his leg. Test hits RVD with the chair. Test hits the flying elbow off the pod onto the chair and pins Van Dam. And well, now it couldn't be more. I mean, we're down to Test, Big Show, and Lashley.
That was a super fucking cool move.
Oh my God. You got a guy, Test had to be pushing 3 bills at this point, and he's jumping off that pod, and he hits this elbow perfectly.
I mean, you could seriously argue that Test is the coolest part of this match.
It's not much competition.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Lashley goes to enter, but Heyman's goons hold the pod shut. So Lashley, as we mentioned, uses the table to break the chains somehow.
Yeah, because tables break through chains like butter.
Why didn't they just have him kick through the glass? This glass gets broken in every match.
You got to protect the sanctity of the glass.
Lashley comes in hot, but he very quickly runs out of stuff to do because he's still learning how to wrestle.
At this point, he has like 5 moves.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, they're not great. The spear's pretty good.
Yeah.
The power slam's pretty good. That's about it.
He spears Test and pins him, so it's Big Show against Lashley. They do a sword fight with the chair and the barbed wire baseball bat. Lashley slams Big Show through the bulletproof glass pod.
It's not Big Show proof. LOL.
Boom.
That was horrible.
Lashley blocks the choke slam with a DDT. The spear for the 1-2-3. Pretty good pop for the win, actually. There's always a pop for a world title change. People are popping because they saw the world title change hands.
Right.
Lukewarm reception Lashley got tonight. They don't hate him, but they're not really into it.
Yep. Like, it's one of those cases where he represents something that they're not okay with. So even if they don't particularly care one way or another about him, they're just going to be inclined not to give a shit because he represents Vince, basically.
Yeah. So Lashley celebrates with the title and the show goes off the air. This is it for Heyman. He ends up getting fired roughly. I mean, not fired, but sent home and then sent to OVW because they were sure that would get him to quit shortly after this.
Yep.
And from there, ECW, they just gradually phase out everything about the old ECW. It just becomes the forerunner to NXT, and in that role, it's pretty good. A lot of good talent came through this territory.
Hell yeah. Eventually, we're going to get to the point where it's like Jack Swagger versus Christian, and they're stealing the show on every undercard pay-per-view, and like that's really cool.
Miz, John Morrison, yeah, a lot of legit guys got their start here. Kofi Kingston, Mark Henry got reinvented here. Regal got reinvented here. I mean, overall, the legacy of this is pretty positive. And if it had just been called NXT, we would remember it a lot more fondly.
Well, it eventually did die in favor of something called NXT, but that was a very different thing.
I was such a big fan of the original NXT. I loved the game show.
I hated it. But that's probably a story for another time.
Yeah. This show was just abominable. I mean, the main event wasn't bad, but it was one of the weaker Elimination Chamber matches, and the opening match was fine, and all the other matches completely sucked.
Like, we've watched worse shows than this in terms of just what we're presented. I do feel that way.
Yeah, sure.
It's just, I've never watched a pay-per-view that felt less like a pay-per-view than this.
No, this felt like an episode of Sunday Night Heat for most of it.
Yeah, it feels like 2 pay-per-view matches with a bunch of like dark match filler bullshit in between. And it just, it winds up just feeling like a big-time house show. That's what this is.
That Stevie Richards Rene Dupree match that was the dark match would not have been out of place on this show at all.
No, like how do you pick the dark match? They're all garbage.
Yeah. Honestly, I wish I would have rather seen Dupree and Stevie Richards than some of this stuff.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this killed. I mean, they never did another ECW pay-per-view after this. There's no way they even considered it.
No, and I don't think that they honestly were going to do one afterwards anyway, no matter how this show had done, honestly, unless it had been absolutely amazing. This just was the nail in the coffin. Like, Paul Heyman is done after this. It's over. ECW, as we know it, is dead. And, like, they're still doing ECW reunion shows to this day, so it's obvious that, like, it'll never truly die in the minds of some people, but this is, if you had to pick a moment where ECW as a concept died, here it is. Bobby Lashley holding up the title.
Vince McMahon brought it back and gave it a lethal dose of poison.
Lethal dose of poison.
And Bobby Lashley.
See, now, if they had presented it like that, he would have been the top heel in the company.
Okay, let's talk about Vince's run as ECW champion, because I don't think I don't think we'll ever get to talk about it again.
Vince McMahon beats Bobby Lashley for the title.
Vince with his do-rag and his sweatshirt, and he's like speaking in Ebonics.
Oh my god.
Man, there was some weird shit going on with Vince in this era. Some really weird stuff.
Like, he wrestles God. Like,
yeah,
isn't it like SummerSlam the next year?
No, that happened already.
That happened already? Oh,
no,
great.
Wait. Did that happen already? Yes, that happened earlier this year. That was after WrestleMania 22. Yeah.
That's bonkers.
That whole Shawn Michaels feud was insane. Big Show got in the middle of that because they did the DX against the McMahons and Big Show, where Vince got his head shoved up Big Show's ass.
Yep, that's a thing that happened.
Yeah, like
then he just comes in here and is the most racist anyone has ever been, ever.
Well, it was a year before this where he said the N-word in that skit with Booker T at Survivor Series.
I vividly remember.
The process that led to that is insane. I can't believe they let that go.
Like, it's just one of those things where, like, obviously there are no checks or balances on Vince at this point, and there need to be.
It's kind of amazing that flew, and even back, I mean, it wasn't that long ago for a publicly traded company.
I don't
only survived because there was no Twitter back then.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
It was just harder for things to break out of the wrestling bubble back then.
The audience was different too. It really was.
Yeah. So I think that wraps us for this debacle we call ECW December to Dismember. Any final thoughts on this?
It sucked. Don't pay money for it. Learn from my mistake.
Yeah. Of course, you can watch this streaming on the WWE Network on demand anytime, but why on earth would you? Find something better to do with this 2.5 hours.
Because I was having some problems with the WWE Network when I reviewed it for the blog, I actually bought a physical copy of the show, meaning that I have now spent
even more?
I have spent $60 total on this pay-per-view.
Oh my god, the sacrifices we
and I own it. I own it forever.
Oh boy.
Oh. Don't be me, kids.
No.
Don't be me.
No. Yeah. That's a wrap for ECW December to Dismember. Next week, the quality of the show isn't going to go up very much, but the historical importance will, because next week we've got Starrcade 1997. Cewsh, what are you looking forward to talking about with this one?
I cannot wait to talk about one of the great, the most important, the best built 2 matches in the history of WCW. Larry Zbyszko versus Eric Bischoff.
Oh, man. You know it would have been a classic if Bischoff didn't jack up his knee in training.
Oh my God, that I love that match. No, there's so much going on with this show, from the bonkers-ass undercard to the main event.
Half the
Which
guys
is
on the
probably-
card no-showed.
Is this the most controversial main event wrestling match at a pay-per-view ever?
Well, it's probably that or the Montreal Screwjob, and they happened within 2 months of each other.
And they both involve poor
Right
Bret
at the
Hart.
center of both of them. He said he wasn't going to let it happen again.
But he did!
Oh, we could go for hours on this, and I'm looking forward to talking about it next week.
Absolutely, man. It's going to be great.
All right, so got that to look forward to next week. Starrcade 97, one of the most infamous nights in wrestling history. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back next week.